Atlas didn't bark. At 9:30 p.m. in Lolo National Forest, he just kept pawing the same hollow oak, slow, steady, like he was marking something buried alive. Daniel pulled the leash. The dog refused. Then came the sound from inside the tree. Metal. What was sealed in there? And why did Atlas already know? What do you think he heard? 9:30 p.m. The dashboard clock in Daniel Brooks's truck blinked faint green through a film of dust. The digits steady but tired, like everything else in his life. The engine had been off for nearly 20 minutes, but the metal still ticked as it cooled, each soft click echoing too loudly in the quiet stretch of forest off Highway 12. He noticed every sound. He always did. Atlas moved first. The German shepherd had been lying low near the passenger door, head resting on his paws, eyes half closed, but never truly asleep. Then something shifted. Not in the air, not in the trees. Something deeper. The dog's ears twitched once, then again. His body stiffened, slow and deliberate, like a switch being flipped somewhere inside him. Daniel didn't speak. He reached for the leash out of habit, fingers brushing the worn nylon loop. Atlas stood. Not fast, not startled, controlled. That was worse. The dog stepped away from the truck without looking back, nose low, moving with purpose into the tree line. No hesitation, no wandering. A straight line. Daniel sighed through his nose, grabbed the flashlight from the center console, and stepped out onto the gravel shoulder. The night air hit him sharp and cold, carrying the scent of damp pine and river mud from somewhere downhill. "Atlas," he called quietly. No response. The dog didn't even flick an ear. Daniel followed, boots crunching softly, weight balanced, eyes scanning left and right without thinking about it. Old habits. He tracked Atlas through the dim outlines of trunks and shadows, adjusting his steps to avoid snapping branches, not because he needed to, because his body didn't know how not to. The forest closed around them within 20 yards. No headlights, no road noise, just the low hum of wind pushing through needles high above. Atlas stopped, just like that. Daniel nearly walked into him. The dog stood facing a massive oak, its trunk wide and uneven, bark split in deep ridges that caught the moonlight in broken lines. Atlas didn't circle, didn't sniff the ground. He stared at the tree. Then he moved. One step forward. Two. His nose touched the bark, tracing a jagged seam that ran vertical along the trunk. Then his paw lifted. Scratch. A slow, deliberate drag across the wood. Scratch. Same spot. Same motion. Same rhythm. Daniel frowned, stepping closer, beam of the flashlight cutting a narrow cone across the surface. The bark looked old, weathered. Nothing unusual. No markings. No fresh damage. Atlas scratched again. Same place. Not random. Not anxious. Measured. "Hey," Daniel muttered, reaching down to grip the leash. "That's enough." He gave a light pull. Atlas didn't move. Daniel pulled harder. Nothing. The dog's muscles locked, weight shifting forward, claws digging slightly into the dirt. A low sound rolled out of his chest. Not a bark, not a growl meant to warn. Something quieter. Something tighter. Daniel froze. He knew that sound. It wasn't aggression. It was focus. The kind of focus that came just before everything went bad. He had heard it once before, years ago, outside a mud-walled compound in Helmand, right before Atlas, back then still wearing a harness and unit patch, had refused to step forward into a doorway. There had been pressure plates buried under the threshold. Atlas had known. Daniel's grip loosened on the leash. "Talk to me," he whispered, more to himself than the dog. Atlas scratched again, then stopped. His nose pressed hard against the same narrow section of bark. He inhaled once, deep and slow, then let out a faint, almost inaudible whine. Not fear. Recognition. Daniel's chest tightened without warning. He shifted his weight, scanning the area automatically. Left, right, tree line, ground, no movement, no sound beyond the wind. Still. He stepped closer to the oak. Up close, the seam in the bark was clearer. A vertical line, subtle but real, where the texture changed just enough to catch the eye. His flashlight beam traced it slowly, revealing a slight indentation, like the tree had grown around something, or over it. Daniel reached out. His fingers hovered for a second, then pressed against the wood. Cold, solid, nothing unusual at first, but then a faint give. Not much, just enough to notice. He pulled his hand back. Atlas's head snapped toward him, eyes sharp, alert, watching every movement. Daniel swallowed. "Yeah," he murmured under his breath. "You see it too." The wind shifted, carrying a faint metallic scent. Or maybe he imagined it. Hard to tell anymore. His senses had been lying to him for years. But Atlas didn't imagine things. The dog stepped back half a pace, giving Daniel space. Not retreating, just repositioning, like he was clearing a lane. Daniel noticed that. He always noticed patterns. His jaw tightened. He adjusted his stance without thinking, feet shoulder-width apart, weight balanced. The flashlight lowered slightly, beam now angled across the base of the tree. He listened. Nothing. Too quiet. Atlas didn't move. Neither did Daniel. Seconds stretched. Then Daniel reached for the small hatchet strapped behind the driver's seat earlier that evening. He hadn't planned on using it. Just something to keep in the truck. Montana roads weren't forgiving. The handle felt familiar in his grip. Worn. Balanced. He hesitated. Atlas let out a soft, low rumble. Not a warning. A push. Daniel exhaled slowly, stepped forward, and raised the hatchet. He didn't swing hard, just enough. The blade struck the bark with a dull thud, and something underneath answered, a sharp, hollow note. Metal. Daniel froze. The sound hung in the air longer than it should have. Atlas didn't move. He was already staring at the spot. Daniel lowered the hatchet slowly, eyes narrowing as the pieces began to shift into place in his mind. Not all of them. Just enough to know one thing for certain. This tree wasn't empty, not even close. He took a step back, listened again. Nothing. But the quiet didn't feel empty anymore. It felt like it was waiting. Atlas sat down beside the trunk, never taking his eyes off it, guarding it. Daniel tightened his grip on the hatchet, heart beating just a little faster now. Not panic, not fear. Recognition. The kind that comes right before everything changes. He glanced once toward the dark stretch of forest behind them, then back to the tree. "All right," he said quietly. "Let's see what you found." The wind moved through the branches above, and somewhere in the distance, something cracked. Daniel didn't turn. He just listened, and for the first time that night, he wasn't sure they were alone. The sound didn't come again. No second crack, no footsteps, no shift in the brush. Just the wind pushing through the trees like it always had, carrying that low, steady hush that made everything else feel louder than it should. Daniel waited anyway. 10 seconds. Maybe 15. His breathing slowed on purpose. Shallow, controlled. The hatchet stayed low in his right hand, blade angled down, not raised. Not yet. Atlas didn't bark. That mattered. The dog's ears were forward, locked on the darkness behind them, body still as stone. No pacing, no pulling, just watching, tracking. Daniel took one step back, then another. He shifted his angle just enough to widen his view of the tree line, placing the oak off to his left instead of directly in front of him. Better line of sight, fewer blind spots. Old habits. Still there. "All right," he said under his breath, voice barely more than air. "We don't need to push this tonight." Atlas didn't move. Daniel clicked his tongue once. Soft. A command without words. The dog hesitated, then slowly stepped back from the tree, eyes lingering on the seam in the bark, like he didn't trust it to stay put. Like it might move the second they turned away. Daniel noticed that too. He reached down and clipped the leash properly this time, tightening it just enough to keep Atlas close. Not restricting, just control. They walked back toward the truck without rushing. Daniel didn't turn his back on the forest until the headlights were in sight. 12:06 a.m. The interior of the Ford F-150 smelled faintly of old coffee and damp canvas. A crumpled receipt from a gas station on Brook Street, $42.17 for regular, sat wedged in the cup holder, half covered by a folded map of Missoula County. Daniel shut the door quietly. Atlas climbed in without being told, circling once on the passenger seat before settling down, though his head stayed up, ears still twitching. Daniel didn't start the engine. Not yet. He sat there, hands resting loosely on the steering wheel, eyes fixed through the windshield at the dark stretch of road ahead. No headlights. No passing cars. Highway 12 was empty this time of night. He reached up and adjusted the rearview mirror. Nothing behind them. Still. His thumb tapped lightly against the wheel. Once. Twice. A rhythm he didn't notice he was keeping. Then a faint metallic ping, somewhere outside. Daniel's body reacted before his mind caught up. His hand moved toward the center console, fingers closing around empty space where something used to be. His shoulders tightened, breath caught halfway in his chest. For a split second, he wasn't in Montana. He was back in Helmand. Heat pressing down, dust in the air, radio crackling, contact front, contact front. He blinked. The truck came back into focus. Cold air, dark trees. Silence. Atlas shifted beside him, pressing his shoulder lightly against Daniel's arm. Not forceful, just enough. Grounding. Daniel exhaled slowly through his nose, hand dropping back to the wheel. "Yeah," he muttered. "I hear it too." But this time the sound didn't repeat. He leaned forward slightly, scanning the edge of the forest again. Nothing moved. No glint of metal. No silhouette breaking the line of trees. Just shadows. Too many shadows. He started the engine. The truck rumbled to life, low and steady, breaking the silence in a way that felt almost too loud. He let it idle for a few seconds, watching the tree line one last time. Then he pulled onto the road. 12:34 a.m. He parked along the gravel pull-off near Clark Fork River, about half a mile from where he usually stopped. Different spot, different angle. He didn't like patterns, Atlas noticed. The dog lifted his head as Daniel cut the engine, eyes moving to the side window, scanning the riverbank where the water moved slow and dark under the moonlight. Daniel grabbed the old wool blanket from behind the seat and tossed it over himself without unfolding it all the way. Boots stayed on. Jacket stayed zipped. He leaned back, closed his eyes, didn't sleep. Minutes passed, maybe longer. Then the memory came. Not full. Never full. Just pieces. A door. mud walls, a man shouting in a language he didn't understand, Atlas pulling hard against the harness, refusing to move forward, Daniel yelling back, trying to push him, then the blast. The truck seat creaked as Daniel's body tensed. His eyes snapped open. 2:03 a.m. The clock on the dashboard glowed faintly. Atlas was already awake, sitting upright now, staring at the passenger window. His breath fogged the glass slightly with each slow exhale. Daniel followed his gaze. Nothing. But the dog didn't relax. Daniel rubbed his face with one hand, dragging his fingers down over his jaw, feeling the rough stubble there. He hadn't shaved in days. Maybe longer. Didn't matter. He reached for the small flashlight again, flicked it on, and angled the beam toward the side mirror. The light bounced back. Empty. He turned it off immediately. Too bright. Too obvious. Atlas let out a low breath and slowly lowered himself back down, though his head stayed up, ears still alert. Daniel shifted in the seat, pulling the blanket tighter around his shoulders. He stared at the windshield, watching the faint movement of branches reflected in the glass. The tree came back into his mind. The seam. The sound. Metal. Not imagined. He knew the difference. His fingers flexed slightly, remembering the weight of the hatchet, the way the vibration had traveled up his arm. Not wood. Something else, something inside. He swallowed. "Tomorrow," he said quietly, voice rough. "We go back in daylight." Atlas's tail thumped once against the seat. "Agreement." Daniel leaned his head back against the worn fabric, eyes still open. The river moved in the distance. The truck ticked as it cooled, and somewhere between those sounds, between the past and whatever waited in that tree, Daniel Brooks stayed awake. Not sleeping, just waiting. By 6:18 a.m., the sky over Clark Fork River had turned a thin gray blue, the kind that didn't warm anything. Frost clung to the edges of the windshield, tracing faint patterns like cracked glass. Daniel hadn't moved much. Same position, same grip on the wheel. Atlas shifted first. The dog stretched slowly, front paws pushing against the dashboard, claws clicking once against the plastic. Then he sat up straight, ears forward, watching the road like he expected something to come down it. Nothing did. Daniel blinked hard, rubbed the back of his neck, then reached for the thermos wedged beside the seat. Coffee. Cold now. He took a sip anyway. Bitter. Thin. Didn't matter. At 6:23 a.m., his phone buzzed. It wasn't loud, just a short vibration against the metal tray near the cup holder. But his body reacted like it was. His hand snapped to it. Unknown number. Montana area code. He stared at it for a second longer than necessary, then answered, "Yeah." A pause. "Mr. Brooks?" The voice on the other end was calm, measured, not rushed. "This is Karen Whitaker with Montana Legal Services. I've been trying to reach you since yesterday." Daniel didn't respond right away. He glanced at Atlas, then out the windshield, scanning the road without thinking. "What's this about?" Another pause. Paper shifting on the other end. "I'm calling regarding the estate of Henry Caldwell. He was your great-uncle. Passed away in February. We have you listed as next of kin." Daniel's jaw tightened slightly. "Never heard of him." "That's not uncommon," she said. No judgment in her tone, just fact. He lived off-grid most of his life, outside Missoula, Lolo area. He served in the Army, World War II. Daniel said nothing. The line stayed quiet for a moment. "There's a property," she continued. 42 acres just north of Lolo National Forest boundary. It's been transferred to you, along with a few specific conditions. Daniel shifted in his seat. The leather creaked under him. What kind of conditions? A custodial agreement, she said. There's a registered animal listed under the estate. A German shepherd. Name, Atlas. Microchip RID. Ending in 7391. Daniel's eyes flicked toward the dog. Atlas didn't move. Just watched. He's already mine, Daniel said flatly. Yes, Karen replied, but not legally. Not until you accept the terms. Your uncle made that very clear. Daniel let out a slow breath through his nose. Why? I don't know, she said, but it's written into the will. You take the land, you take responsibility for the dog, or the property goes to the county. Silence settled again. Daniel looked out toward the river. The water moved slow, dark, steady, same as last night. Where's the paperwork? Missoula office, she said. Room 214, 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. We can walk you through everything. It won't take long. Daniel checked the clock. 6:29 a.m. He could be there by 9, if he wanted to. I'll think about it, he said. That's fine, Karen replied. Just understand, there's also a time clause. If you don't respond within 72 hours, the property defaults. No extensions. Daniel nodded once, even though she couldn't see it. Got it. Mr. Brooks? Yeah. He left something behind, she said. Not money, not anything like that, but something he wanted you to see. Daniel didn't answer. The line went quiet. Then, thank you for your time, she added, and hung up. 7:02 a.m. Daniel stood outside the truck, stretching his back slowly, joints stiff from the cold and the night. The sun had started to push through the clouds now, pale and weak, barely touching the tops of the trees. Atlas jumped down beside him. The dog shook once, fur catching the light, then immediately turned his head toward the direction of the forest. Not the river, not the road, the tree. Daniel followed his gaze. Yeah, he muttered. I know. He walked around the truck, popped the tailgate, and pulled out a small canvas bag. Inside, a half-full bottle of water, a protein bar, a folded flannel shirt, and the hatchet. He held it for a second, then set it back down. Not yet. Atlas's ears twitched. Daniel closed the tailgate. 8:41 a.m. Missoula traffic moved slow near Brooks Street. A delivery truck idled in front of the depot bar and restaurant, back doors open, crates stacked unevenly near the curb. Someone inside laughed too loud. Morning noise. Normal noise. Daniel parked half a block down, engine off. He sat there for a moment, watching people move past the windshield. Coffee cups, jackets, phones. Nobody looking at him. That was fine. Atlas stayed in the passenger seat, head low, but eyes tracking every movement outside. Not anxious, just aware. Daniel reached into the glove compartment and pulled out a folded envelope. Inside, an old VA card, edges worn, and a receipt from a motel on Reserve Street, room 108, $63.50. 2 nights. 3 months ago. He stared at it for a second, then put it back. Stay, he said quietly. Atlas didn't move. Daniel stepped out. 8:57 a.m. The hallway outside room 214 smelled like old carpet and printer toner. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, flickering just slightly at the edges. Daniel paused at the door, then knocked. Come in, a voice called. He stepped inside. Karen Whitaker sat behind a desk stacked with files, glasses low on her nose, pen in hand. She looked up, studied him for half a second, then nodded. "Mr. Brooks." Daniel didn't sit. "Let's make this quick." Karen smiled faintly. Not offended. Just used to it. "Of course." She slid a folder across the desk. "Everything you need is in there. Deed, transfer forms, custodial agreement. It's straightforward." Daniel opened it. Pages, signatures, legal language. Then a photograph slipped loose and landed on the desk. Black and white. An old man, standing beside a German shepherd. Daniel's fingers stilled. The dog looked familiar. Not Atlas, but close enough to make his chest tighten just a little. "Your uncle," Karen said softly. "And his dog. Taken sometime in the late 60s, I believe." Daniel didn't respond. He picked up the photo, looked closer, then set it back down. "Where's the land?" he asked. Karen pulled out a map, unfolded it across the desk. "Right here," she said, pointing. "About 8 miles off Highway 12. Access road isn't great. You'll need a decent vehicle." Daniel nodded once. He knew the area. Too well. Atlas had taken him there last night. He closed the folder. "All right," he said. "All right? I'll take it." Karen nodded, already reaching for the pen. "Then let's get you set up." Daniel signed where she pointed. No hesitation, no questions, just ink on paper. And when it was done, she slid the folder back toward him. "It's yours now." Daniel picked it up, held it for a second, then turned and walked out. 9:26 a.m. Atlas lifted his head the moment Daniel opened the truck door. No wag, no excitement, just focus. Daniel tossed the folder onto the seat. Atlas sniffed it once, then looked up at him. Daniel leaned against the door, staring out toward the street. Cars passed. People moved. Normal. But his mind wasn't there anymore. It was back in the trees. Back at the oak. Back at that sound. He pushed off the door, climbed into the driver's seat, and started the engine. Atlas sat up straight. "Ready?" Daniel glanced at him once. "Yeah," he said quietly. "Let's go see what your uncle left behind." The truck pulled into traffic, heading back toward Highway 12. And this time, they weren't just passing through. By 10:12 a.m., the truck left the paved stretch of Highway 12 and turned onto a narrow dirt road barely wide enough for one vehicle. A weathered sign leaned crooked at the entrance. Letters faded to near nothing. Daniel didn't slow much. He knew the kind of place this was. Unmaintained. Forgotten. Left alone on purpose. Gravel snapped under the tires. Branches brushed against the sides with a dry scrape that set something off in the back of his head. His eyes flicked to the mirrors, then forward again. Always forward. Atlas stood with his front paws braced against the dashboard, watching the road like he recognized it. Not excited. Not curious. Certain. Daniel noticed that. "You been here before?" he muttered. Atlas didn't answer. Just leaned slightly left as the truck rounded a bend, adjusting balance like he already knew what came next. That wasn't normal. The road narrowed further, cutting through dense pine and oak, sunlight breaking through in scattered patches that shifted with the wind. The kind of light that plays tricks on depth, shadows that look like movement. Daniel slowed. At 10:19 a.m., he killed the engine, Same spot as last night. No marker, no clearing, just instinct. Atlas jumped down before Daniel even reached for the door handle, landing soft on the dirt and immediately turning toward the trees. Not waiting, leading. Daniel grabbed the canvas bag this time. Water, flashlight, hatchet. No hesitation. Stay close, he said. Atlas moved forward anyway. The forest felt different in daylight. Less threatening, more honest. You could see the ground, the roots, the broken branches. The shadows had edges now, defined, clear, but the quiet stayed the same. Too clean. Daniel followed the same path as the night before, though he didn't need to think about it. His feet found the route on their own. Subtle bends, slight dips in the terrain. He tracked them like muscle memory, or something close to it. Atlas moved ahead, nose low, then lifting every few steps, checking air, checking distance, not searching, confirming. Daniel slowed his pace, watched the dog instead of the ground. Pattern recognition, that's what they used to call it. The oak came into view at 10:27 a.m. Same tree, same split in the bark. But in daylight, it looked different. Older. The seam ran deeper than he thought, not just a surface crack. A long vertical split where the bark had grown uneven, folding slightly inward like it had swallowed something years ago. Atlas walked straight to it. No circling, no hesitation. He placed his nose against the exact same spot as last night, then stepped back, looked at Daniel, waited. That was new. Daniel stopped about 6 feet away, didn't approach immediately. He let his eyes move first. Left side of the trunk, ground level. Roots. The dirt around it looked undisturbed. No fresh digging. No tracks besides their own from the night before. He shifted right. Different angle. Same result. Nothing obvious. But Atlas wasn't wrong. He never had been. Daniel stepped closer. Slow. Measured. The hatchet stayed low at his side, blade angled toward the ground. His other hand reached out, fingers brushing against the bark again. Rough, dry, splintered in places. He followed the seam upward this time, about chest height, then higher. At eye level, something caught the light. A faint discoloration. Not natural. Slightly darker than the surrounding wood. Like something had pressed against it from the inside for a long time. Daniel leaned in, closer. His breath slowed. Yeah, he whispered. Atlas shifted his weight. Waiting. Daniel stepped back 2 paces, set his feet, then raised the hatchet. He didn't swing right away. He listened first. Wind. Leaves. Distant bird call. No movement. He swung. The blade struck just below the discolored patch. A dull crack. Then that sound again. Metal. Clearer this time. Sharper. It echoed through the trunk like a hollow chamber. Daniel froze mid-breath. Atlas didn't move. The forest didn't move. Everything held. Daniel lowered the hatchet slowly, then took 1 step back. 3 beats, then another. Distance. Always create distance. He shifted his angle again, circling halfway around the tree, eyes scanning the bark from a new perspective. The seam curved slightly here, wider at the base, narrowing as it climbed. Growth pattern. Something had been there a long time. All right, he said quietly. Let's not rush this. Atlas gave a short, soft huff. Not impatience. Agreement. Daniel crouched down near the base of the tree, brushing aside a thin layer of dry leaves. The soil underneath was compact, dark, untouched. No recent disturbance. Whatever was inside, it wasn't placed there recently. He stood again, looked up at the trunk, then back at the spot he struck. The mark was shallow, barely more than a notch, but enough to expose a darker layer beneath the outer bark. He reached out, pressed his fingers into it. There, a faint edge. Not wood, not bark. Something flat, something solid. Daniel pulled his hand back. Atlas stepped forward immediately, placing himself between Daniel and the tree for a brief second before shifting to the side again, eyes locked on the same spot. Guarding. Not from it. From something else, Daniel noticed. His head turned slightly, scanning the perimeter again. Left. Right. Behind. Still nothing. But the feeling hadn't left. That quiet. That pressure. Like something just outside the line of sight. He tightened his grip on the hatchet. Not raising it. Just ready, okay? He said under his breath. We open it. Atlas's ears snapped forward. Daniel stepped in again, adjusting his stance, choosing a new angle. More controlled. Less force. He didn't want to damage whatever was inside. He brought the hatchet down carefully, chipping away at the bark along the seam. Small strikes, precise. Each hit sending a dull vibration up his arm. Wood splintered, pieces fell, and slowly, a shape began to form beneath. Straight lines, edges, not natural. Daniel paused, breathing steady, then leaned in closer, brushing away loose bark with his hand. There it was, just barely visible now. A corner, dark, metal. Atlas let out a low, steady breath. Daniel didn't look at him. He didn't look anywhere else. Just at that edge, buried inside a living tree, waiting. Daniel didn't move right away. His eyes stayed locked on that exposed corner, half hidden behind layers of splintered bark. The metal was dull, not reflective, old enough that the forest had already started claiming it back. Atlas shifted beside him. One step forward, then still again. Daniel raised his hand slightly. Hold. The dog froze mid-motion. No resistance. Good. Daniel leaned closer, lowering his center of gravity, bringing his face within a foot of the trunk. The smell hit him first. Damp wood, resin, and something else. Faint, iron, not fresh, not sharp, just there. He angled his head, listening again. No movement in the trees, no crunch of gravel from the road, no engine, just wind, still clean, but not empty. Daniel pulled back, exhaled slowly, then set the hatchet down on the ground. Not out of reach, just not in his hand. Different approach. He reached into the canvas bag and pulled out a small folding knife. Blade worn, handle scratched. He flipped it open with his thumb and began working at the edge of the bark, shaving away thin layers instead of striking. Slow work, precise. Each movement controlled, measured, like disarming something that might still be active. Atlas watched every inch of it. No distractions. No scanning now. Just the tree. Daniel noticed that too. Yeah, he murmured. You're locked in. He scraped away another strip. More metal appeared. Flat surface. Slight curve on one side. Not just a fragment. A structure. A box. Daniel stopped. He pulled the knife away, sat back on his heels, and studied what he could see. The tree had grown around it, not over it, around it, which meant, "It's been here a long time," he said quietly. Atlas let out a low breath. Daniel nodded once. "Yeah." He reached forward again, this time pressing both hands against the exposed section of bark and wood. He pushed. Nothing. He shifted his grip, fingers digging into the rough edges he'd carved out, and pulled outward. The wood didn't give. Of course it didn't. He sat back again, thinking. Then he stood, walked a slow circle around the tree, and came back to the same spot. Different angle. Same problem. Too tight. The tree had sealed it in. He picked up the hatchet again, held it, weighed the options, then shook his head slightly. Too much force, we damage whatever's inside. Atlas's ears twitched. Daniel glanced at him. "You don't like that either, huh?" The dog didn't respond. Didn't need to. Daniel crouched again, this time lower, near the base of the trunk. He ran his hand along the seam downward, following it as far as it went. About knee height, the bark widened slightly, a natural weakness. He tapped it lightly with the handle of the hatchet. Hollow. Not fully, but enough. Daniel's eyes narrowed. "All right," he said under his breath. "We open it from here." He repositioned himself, feet braced, body angled. Then he swung. Not hard. Controlled. The blade bit into the lower section of the seam with a dull crack. Wood splintered outward. Small pieces fell to the ground. He swung again. And again. Each strike deliberate. Each pause just long enough to listen. No interruption. No footsteps. No voices. But the feeling didn't go away. Atlas suddenly turned his head. Sharp. His ears snapped toward the left side of the tree line, body shifting slightly, weight forward. A low sound rolled out of his chest again, quieter than before. Daniel froze mid-motion. Where? Atlas didn't look back. He held his position, watching. Daniel didn't follow his gaze immediately. He kept his head still, eyes forward, listening first. Then, slowly, he turned just enough to widen his field of view. Nothing. But Atlas didn't break. That meant something. Daniel set the hatchet down again, this time closer to his knee, easy reach. His right hand hovered near it, not gripping, just ready. "Just wind," he whispered. Atlas didn't respond. The dog took one step forward, then stopped. No charge, no bark, just a warning. Daniel waited 5 seconds, 10, 15. Nothing came out of the trees. No movement. No sound beyond the branches shifting overhead. Slowly, Atlas relaxed. Barely. His head turned back toward the tree. Daniel exhaled. "All right," he said. "We finished this." He picked up the hatchet again and resumed, focusing on the lower seam. The wood gave more easily here. Less dense. Less resistance. After 3 more strikes, a larger section cracked. A hollow space opened. Not wide, but enough. Daniel dropped the hatchet and immediately switched to his hands, pulling away loose wood, widening the opening carefully. Bark snapped. Fibers tore. The tree resisted, but it was losing, piece by piece. The gap grew. Then, a shift. Something inside moved, just slightly. Daniel froze. Atlas stiffened instantly, both of them listening. The object inside had settled deeper into the hollow. Gravity, nothing else. Daniel swallowed once, then reached in. Slow. His fingers brushed against metal. Cold. Solid. He paused, then wrapped his hand around the edge and pulled. At first, Nothing happened. The box was wedged tight, locked in by years of growth and pressure. Daniel adjusted his grip, pulled harder. Wood creaked around it. The tree resisted. Then, a sharp crack. The box shifted. Daniel leaned back, putting his weight into it, boots digging into the dirt for traction. The muscles in his forearms tightened, veins standing out as he pulled again. Inch by inch, he muttered. Atlas moved closer, standing almost against him now, eyes fixed on the opening. The box slid forward, another inch, then another. With one final pull, it came loose. Daniel stumbled back half a step as the weight shifted suddenly into his hands. He caught himself, tightening his grip. The box wasn't large, maybe 12 inches long, 8 wide, 4 deep, military style, old. The surface was scratched, worn, corners dulled by time. A latch sat on top, rusted but intact. Daniel stared at it, breathing steady, not rushing. Atlas stepped forward slowly, then stopped. He didn't sniff the box, didn't touch it. He looked at Daniel instead, waiting. Daniel lowered the box carefully onto the ground between them. His hands stayed on it for a moment longer than necessary. Then he pulled them away. Silence settled again. Different now. He sat back on his heels, eyes locked on the latch. "All right," he said quietly. No one answered. He reached forward. His fingers hovered over the rusted clasp, then closed around it. The metal was rough, cold, unforgiving. He pulled. It didn't move. He adjusted his grip, pulled again. This time, a faint click. The latch gave. Just enough. Daniel stopped. Didn't open it yet. Atlas leaned forward slightly, his breath slow, steady, waiting. And for the first time since they found the tree, Daniel hesitated. His thumb rested on the rusted latch, feeling the rough edge bite lightly into his skin. Not enough to cut. Just enough to remind him this thing had been sitting somewhere untouched for a long time. Atlas didn't move, didn't blink. The dog's eyes stayed locked on the box, body angled slightly forward, weight balanced like he was waiting for something to come out of it. Not open it. Come out. Daniel noticed that. He exhaled slowly, then pushed the latch the rest of the way. It snapped open with a dull, tired click. The sound felt louder than it should have. He paused, listened. Nothing answered, just wind brushing the leaves. Daniel lifted the lid. Slow, careful. The hinge creaked, stiff from age, resisting before finally giving way. The inside of the box revealed itself inch by inch, shadows pulling back as sunlight reached in. At first, it didn't register, just shapes, muted colors. Then the light caught something, a dull yellow glint. Daniel leaned in, closer. Gold. Not bright, not polished. Old, worn. Coins stacked loosely inside, edges uneven, surfaces scratched from time. Some darker than others. A few partially buried beneath cloth that had long since faded into a gray-brown patch of fabric. He didn't touch them. Not yet. Atlas didn't react. The dog's eyes passed over the coins without interest. That mattered. Daniel shifted his focus. There were other things in the box. A small leather pouch, cracked along the edges. A folded piece of cloth tied with a thin cord. And beneath it, a metal object. Flat, circular. He reached in slowly, fingers brushing the fabric aside, then lifting the cloth bundle carefully. It was lighter than expected, The cord slipped loose with almost no resistance, as if it had already given up years ago. Inside, a badge. Old military insignia. Not modern, not something Daniel recognized immediately. The metal was tarnished, surface darkened, but the shape was clear. An eagle. Spread wings, something etched beneath it, worn down to near nothing. Daniel held it in his palm, turned it slightly. Light caught the edge. Atlas moved. Just one step, then another. The dog came closer, head lowering, eyes fixed not on Daniel, but on the badge. Daniel froze. Atlas stopped inches away, nose hovering just above the metal. He didn't sniff, didn't touch, just stayed there. Then a sound. Low, soft, a faint whine. Daniel's chest tightened before he could stop it. He had heard that sound before. Not here, not in Montana. In Helmand. Dust in the air. Heat pressing down. A body on the ground. Atlas sitting beside it, refusing to move, letting out that same quiet sound. Recognition. Loss. Daniel swallowed. "Hey," he murmured. "What is it?" Atlas didn't look at him. The dog slowly lowered himself to the ground, front paws stretching forward, head dipping slightly, but his eyes never left the badge, guarding it, or honoring it. Daniel shifted his grip, holding the insignia a little tighter without realizing it. "All right," he said quietly. "All right." He set the badge gently on the ground between them. Atlas didn't move closer. He stayed exactly where he was. Watching. Daniel reached back into the box. This time his fingers found the leather pouch. He lifted it out carefully. The material was stiff, edges cracked, but it held together. He opened it slowly, expecting resistance. It gave. Inside, jewelry, rings, a broken chain, a small pendant shaped like a cross. Nothing overly polished, not modern. Pieces that looked like they had been carried, not displayed. Daniel poured a few into his palm. They clinked softly, solid, real. He set them back. Didn't count. Didn't need to. Then he noticed something beneath the pouch. A book. Small. Bound in dark leather, corners worn down, spine cracked along one edge. It was tucked flat against the bottom of the box, protected from moisture by the layers above it. Daniel hesitated again. Different kind this time. He reached in and lifted it out. The cover was dry but fragile, like it might split if handled wrong. He turned it over slowly, brushing away a thin layer of dust with the back of his fingers. No title, just initials, faded, barely visible. He opened it. The pages inside were yellowed, edges curled slightly, but intact. Handwritten text filled the lines. Ink faded, but still readable. Dates. Entries. Daniel flipped to the first page. June 1918. He stopped. Atlas shifted again, this time lifting his head slightly, eyes moving from the badge to the journal. Daniel read the first line silently, then the next. His jaw tightened just a fraction. He flipped forward. More entries. Different dates. Mentions of movement. Supplies. Names. Not stories. Records. Field notes. Daniel closed the journal slowly. Not all the way. Just enough. He sat there for a long moment, the forest pressing in around them, quiet but no longer empty. Coins, jewelry, a badge, a journal from 1918. None of it made sense together unless... He glanced at Atlas. The dog hadn't moved from his spot. Still watching, still quiet, still locked onto that badge. Daniel followed his gaze again, looked at the insignia lying in the dirt, then back at the box. "Yeah," he said under his breath. "You didn't care about the gold." Atlas didn't respond. Didn't need to. Daniel leaned back slightly, shifting his weight, eyes scanning the tree line again out of instinct. The feeling was still there, that quiet pressure at the edge of awareness, like something had been waiting for this moment. He reached down and closed the box, not fully, just enough to cover the contents. Then he picked up the badge again, held it in his hand, turned it once more under the light. "Who were you?" he murmured. The wind moved through the branches above. Atlas's ears twitched, and somewhere, far off through the trees, a branch snapped. Daniel's head turned instantly. The forest didn't answer, but this time, he knew for certain. They weren't alone. Daniel didn't turn fast. He didn't snap toward the sound like most people would. That kind of movement got you noticed, got you tracked. Instead, he shifted slowly, like he was just adjusting his balance, eyes moving first, scanning the tree line in a wide arc. Left, right, back to center. Nothing. But Atlas had already changed. The dog rose from the ground in one smooth motion, stepping in front of Daniel without being told. Not aggressive, not barking, just placing himself there, between Daniel and whatever might be watching. Blocking. Daniel lowered the badge into his jacket pocket without breaking his line of sight. The metal felt heavier now, not because of the weight, because of what it carried. "Easy," he whispered. Atlas didn't relax. His ears stayed forward, his body angled slightly toward the left side of the clearing, muscles tight, ready to move in any direction. Daniel followed that line. There, about 30 yards out, just beyond a cluster of thin pines, something shifted. Not a full shape, just a break in the pattern, a flicker where light didn't fall the same way twice. Could have been wind, could have been nothing. But Atlas didn't believe in nothing. Daniel's jaw set slightly. "All right," he murmured. "We're done here." He moved fast now, not rushed, just efficient. The journal went back into the box. The pouch, the coins, everything layered exactly as it had been. He didn't count, didn't inspect, just secured it. The lid closed with a muted thud, latch pressed down firmly. He wiped the edges once with his sleeve. Instinct. Then he grabbed the box and stood. Atlas didn't move until Daniel did. Then he fell into position immediately. Close, tight, just off Daniel's left leg. Protection detail. Daniel took a slow step backward, eyes still scanning. Then another. He didn't turn his back. Not yet. The shape in the trees didn't move again. But it didn't leave either. Daniel felt it, that quiet pressure, watching. "Move," he said softly. Atlas obeyed. They walked out of the clearing the way they came, Daniel adjusting his path slightly, not following the exact line from before. Small changes, subtle, enough to break a pattern, enough to make tracking harder. Every few steps he paused, listened. The forest stayed quiet. Too quiet. At 10:58 a.m., they reached the edge of the trees where the light opened up and the dirt road came back into view. The truck sat exactly where he left it, sun reflecting off the windshield in a dull glare. Daniel didn't relax. Not yet. He opened the passenger door, set the box on the floorboard, then stepped back and scanned the road. Empty. No tire tracks beyond his own, no parked vehicles. But that didn't mean anything. He walked around to the driver's side, opened the door, then stopped halfway in, listened again. Atlas stood just behind him, head turned toward the forest, not the road. Still watching, Daniel slid into the seat, started the engine, and pulled the door shut. The truck rumbled to life. Normal sound. Grounding. Atlas jumped in beside him, turning once before sitting upright, eyes fixed on the side mirror. Daniel pulled onto the road, slow at first, then faster. 7:17 a.m. They didn't go back toward Missoula. Not immediately. Daniel took a side road instead, one that cut south before looping back around. Less traffic, fewer eyes. He drove with one hand on the wheel, the other resting lightly near the center console. Not gripping, just ready. Atlas shifted once, then leaned forward slightly, nose near the passenger window. The glass carried faint streaks of dust and dried water, catching the sunlight in uneven lines. The dog's reflection stared back at him, still alert, still locked in. Daniel glanced at him. "You saw it before I did," he said quietly. Atlas didn't respond, but his ears twitched. Daniel nodded once. Yeah, he drove in silence for a while, letting the road unwind beneath them. Gravel turned to pavement around 11:29 a.m., the truck easing onto a wider stretch that eventually fed back toward Highway 93. More cars here. Normal traffic. A pickup passed going the opposite direction, driver barely glancing over. Good. Daniel merged in. 11:42 a.m. He pulled into a small gas station just outside Lolo. The sign read $3.89 for regular, numbers flickering slightly in the sunlight. 2 pumps occupied, 1 empty. He took it. Engine off. Atlas stayed in the truck. Daniel stepped out, stretching his back slightly as he reached for the nozzle. The smell of gasoline hit sharp and familiar. Grounding again. He started the pump. The numbers rolled. $10, $18.76, $27.43. He watched them climb without really seeing them. His mind stayed back in the trees. That shape. That shift. Someone had been there. Not close enough to engage, but close enough to watch. That wasn't random. Daniel tightened his grip slightly on the nozzle. At $41.92, the pump clicked off. He replaced it, then stepped back, scanning the lot casually. A sedan pulled in. An older man stepped out, head down, moving slow. No threat. Daniel walked back to the truck, opened the door, and sat. Atlas looked at him immediately. Daniel reached into his jacket and pulled out the badge, held it between his fingers. The metal caught the light differently here. Cleaner, more defined. Atlas leaned forward. Slow, careful. He didn't touch it, but his nose hovered close. Then, that sound again. Soft, low, the same one. Daniel stared at him. "What is it?" he asked quietly. Atlas didn't answer, but he didn't look away either. Daniel turned the badge over in his hand, examining the worn engraving again. The eagle, the faded lines beneath it. Something about it. Something Atlas recognized. Something Daniel didn't. Not yet. He slid it back into his pocket, then started the engine again. 12:03 p.m. Back on the road, heading north now, Daniel adjusted the rearview mirror. A vehicle sat 2 cars behind. Dark SUV. Nothing unusual, except it stayed there. Same distance. Same lane changes. Daniel watched it for 3 full turns. Didn't react. Just observed. Pattern. Atlas shifted slightly in his seat. His ears angled back. Then forward again. He noticed it too. Daniel's grip on the wheel tightened just a fraction. "Yeah," he muttered. He took the next turn without signaling. The SUV followed. Not immediately. Half a second delay. But it followed. Daniel didn't speed up, didn't slow down. He just drove. Measured. Controlled. Watching. And for the first time since opening that box, he wasn't thinking about what was inside it. He was thinking about who else knew. 12:07 p.m. The dark SUV stayed 2 cars back. Not tailgating, not obvious, just present. It drifted slightly when traffic shifted, then corrected, held distance. Never too close, never too far. That was training, or experience. Daniel didn't stare at it. He checked it. Quick glances through the rear view. Reflections in passing windows. Side mirror angles adjusted just enough to keep it in frame without turning his head. Atlas shifted again. Not restless. Focused. The dog's gaze kept sliding between the mirror and the road ahead, like he was triangulating something Daniel couldn't see yet. "Stay with me," Daniel muttered. He took a right onto a narrower road, South 3rd Street West, without signaling again. A habit now. Brake patterns. Forced decisions. The SUV followed. Same delay. Half a second. That confirmed it. Daniel's jaw tightened just slightly. "All right," he said under his breath. "You're not just passing through either." He drove another 2 blocks, then slowed near a small hardware store with a faded sign, Bitterroot Supply Company. A couple of trucks parked out front. One man loading lumber into the back. Normal place. Public. Eyes everywhere. Daniel pulled in. The SUV kept going. Didn't turn. Didn't slow. Just drove past. Gone. Atlas's ears twitched once. Daniel didn't relax. He waited. Counted silently. 5 seconds. 10. 15. Then he checked the side mirror again. Empty road. He exhaled. Not relief. Adjustment. "Smart," he murmured. Didn't want to be seen. Atlas let out a soft breath and settled slightly, though his posture didn't fully drop. Not over. Not yet. 12:19 p.m. Inside the store, the air smelled like sawdust and motor oil. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a pale wash across shelves lined with tools, rope, nails sorted in small labeled bins. Daniel walked the aisles without a basket. No rush, no browsing, just moving. Atlas stayed tight at his side, silent, drawing a few looks, but no comments. People in places like this didn't ask questions unless they had to. Daniel stopped near the hand tools, picked up a pry bar, set it down, picked up a heavier one, kept it. "Need anything else?" The man at the counter called out. Daniel didn't look up. "No." He walked to the register, set the pry bar down. Price tag read $18.73. The man scanned it. "That all?" "Yeah. Cash. No receipt." Daniel stepped back outside. 12:31 p.m. He didn't go back the same way. Didn't go straight to the forest either. Instead, he drove north toward Reserve Street, merging briefly into heavier traffic. Enough noise, enough movement, harder to isolate. Atlas watched the road. Daniel watched everything else. Mirrors, reflections, movement at the edges. Nothing followed. Not now. But that didn't mean it was over. At 12:46 p.m., he turned off again, this time taking a longer route that looped wide before cutting back toward the same dirt road near Highway 12. Different approach. Same destination. 1:18 p.m. The truck rolled to a stop just short of the original entry point. Not at the same spot. About 80 yards back, partially shielded by a cluster of low pines. Daniel killed the engine. Silence returned. Different now. Atlas was already watching the tree line. Daniel reached down, grabbed the metal box from the floorboard, and held it for a second. The weight sat differently in his hands now. Not just metal and coins. A problem. He set it back down. "Stays here," he said quietly. Atlas didn't argue. Daniel stepped out, pry bar in hand now instead of the hatchet. He closed the door softly, then paused, listened. Nothing. But the feeling came back. Stronger. He turned his head slightly toward the deeper part of the forest. "You still out there?" he muttered. No answer. Of course not. He moved anyway. The path felt tighter this time. Not physically, just narrower. Daniel adjusted his steps, slower now, more deliberate. His eyes moved constantly, not just ahead but to the sides, behind, above. Branches, shadows, breaks in the terrain. Atlas moved ahead, but not as far as before. He stayed within 10 feet. Closer, protective. At 1:26 p.m., they reached the clearing. The oak stood the same, silent, unmoved, but something was different. Daniel saw it immediately. Footprints. Faint. Near the edge of the clearing, where the ground softened slightly under shade. Not deep. Not obvious. But there. Not his. Not from last night. Fresh. Atlas froze. Then lowered his head slightly, scenting the air, body going still in that same way it had back in the truck. Tracking. Daniel crouched slowly, keeping his weight balanced, eyes flicking between the prints and the tree line. Boot tread, size larger than his own. One set, maybe two. Hard to tell. "Damn," he muttered. Atlas let out a low, controlled rumble. Daniel followed his line of sight. Left side. Same place as before. Same cluster of thin pines. Nothing visible. But something had been there. Recently. Daniel stood slowly. The pry bar hung loose in his hand, but his grip tightened just enough to feel the metal bite into his palm. "Okay," he said quietly. "We're not alone in this anymore." Atlas didn't move, didn't look away. Daniel took one step toward the tree, then stopped. He turned instead, scanning the entire perimeter of the clearing again. Not rushing, not reacting. Thinking. They had watched him find it, or they had found it after him. Either way, the situation had changed. Daniel exhaled slowly. "Yeah," he said under his breath. "Now it's a problem." The wind shifted slightly. Leaves moved. And somewhere just beyond the trees, something moved back, not seen, but felt. Watching. Waiting. 1:31 p.m. Daniel didn't step closer to the tree. Not this time. He stood at the edge of the clearing, weight slightly shifted back, eyes moving between the fresh footprints and the tree line where Atlas kept staring. The wind had picked up just enough to move the branches, but not enough to hide movement. That mattered. Atlas took one slow step forward, then stopped. His body lowered just a fraction, front legs tense, head angled. Not aggressive, not defensive. Ready. Daniel followed his gaze again. Same spot, same thin pines. Nothing visible, but the space felt occupied. He didn't push it. Back, he said quietly. Atlas hesitated, then obeyed. They stepped out of the clearing together, Daniel walking backward for the first few yards, before finally turning once the trees closed in around them. His pace stayed even, not rushed, not slow. Controlled exit. No chase came. No voice called out. But that didn't mean anything. 2:08 p.m. The truck started on the first turn. Good. Daniel pulled away without spinning gravel, easing onto the dirt road like he was just another guy leaving the woods. No urgency. No panic. Atlas didn't relax. He stayed upright in the passenger seat, eyes fixed on the side mirror, watching the road behind them fade into distance. Daniel took the longer route again. Different turns, different angles, breaking lines. By 2:26 p.m., they were back near the outskirts of Missoula. More traffic, more noise, more cover. He didn't go to the river this time, didn't go back to the usual pull-off. Instead, he drove toward a quiet stretch behind an old storage facility near Expressway Boulevard. Rows of metal units, chain-link fence, cameras mounted high on poles. Better. He parked in a blind spot between two buildings where the cameras overlapped just enough to make a gap. Engine off. Silence. Atlas shifted slightly, then turned his head toward Daniel. Waiting. Daniel reached down and pulled the box from the floorboard, set it on the seat between them. He didn't open it. Not again. Not here. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out the badge, held it in his palm. Atlas leaned in immediately. Same reaction, same focus. The dog's breathing slowed, steady and controlled, but that low sound crept back in again. Not loud, not constant, just there. Daniel turned the badge over once more. The engraving caught the dim light filtering through the windshield. The eagle, the worn lines beneath it. There was something scratched along the edge, letters. He squinted. Faint. J. C. He murmured. Could have been more. Could have been less. Hard to tell. Atlas's nose hovered close again. Then, a sudden noise. Sharp. Metal on metal. Daniel's head snapped toward the driver's side window, a door slamming somewhere in the lot. His body reacted instantly, hand moving, weight shifting, eyes locking onto the source. A man stepped out from behind one of the storage rows, keys in hand, walking toward a pickup truck parked 2 lanes over. Normal. Daniel didn't relax right away. He watched the man unlock his truck, open the door, toss something inside. No attention toward Daniel. No hesitation. Just routine. Daniel exhaled slowly. His grip loosened. Atlas settled slightly, but not fully. 3:22 a.m. The sound came first. A faint scrape, metal dragging against metal. Daniel's eyes opened before his mind caught up. Dark. The inside of the truck was black except for the faint glow of the dashboard clock. 3:22 a.m. Atlas was already up, standing, rigid. His body blocked the passenger door completely, shoulders squared, head low, a deep growl building in his chest. Not loud, controlled. Daniel didn't move right away. He listened. Another scrape. Closer this time. At the passenger side. Daniel's hand moved slowly toward the center console. Nothing there. Of course. His fingers curled into empty space. For a split second. Helmand. Night op. No lights. Someone outside the perimeter. Hold, he whispered. Atlas didn't move. The growl deepened. The handle on the passenger door shifted slightly. Just a fraction. Tested. Daniel's breathing slowed. Controlled. He reached down quietly, fingers closing around the pry bar he'd left between the seats. The metal felt solid in his hand. Real. Grounding. The handle moved again. Then, a sharper pull. Atlas lunged. Not through the door. Into it. His body slammed against the panel with a heavy thud, teeth snapping just inches from the glass as a deep bark finally broke loose. Loud, violent, unexpected. The figure outside jerked back instantly. A shadow moved. Fast. Footsteps. Running. Daniel pushed the door open in one motion, stepping out with the pry bar raised, eyes scanning the darkness. Hey! No answer. Just the sound of boots hitting gravel, fading fast toward the edge of the lot. Daniel moved 2 steps forward, then stopped. Didn't chase. Bad idea. Atlas stood beside him now, breathing hard, ears locked toward the direction the figure had gone. His front paw lifted slightly. Blood. A thin line ran along it, barely visible in the low light. Glass. He must have hit it harder than Daniel thought. Damn it, Daniel muttered, dropping the pry bar to his side and kneeling down immediately. Easy. Easy. Atlas didn't pull away. He stayed still as Daniel lifted the paw gently, checking the cut. Not deep, but enough to sting, enough to bleed. Daniel tore a strip from the inside of his sleeve, wrapping it tight around the paw. Atlas didn't flinch, just watched him. Close, steady. Daniel finished the wrap, then rested his hand briefly on the dog's neck. You held the line, he said quietly. Atlas leaned into him for half a second, then pulled back, alert again. Daniel stood slowly, eyes scanning the lot one more time. Empty. Too empty. He looked back at the truck. The passenger door hung slightly open. The edge of the lock showed fresh scratches. Someone had tried, and they knew exactly where to try. Daniel's jaw tightened. He closed the door firmly, then looked out into the darkness. Yeah, he said under his breath. It's not just curiosity anymore. Atlas stood beside him, wounded, but unshaken. And for the first time since this started, Daniel understood something clearly. They weren't being watched anymore. They were being hunted. 3:28 a.m. Daniel didn't go back to sleep. He didn't try. The truck engine stayed off, the interior dark except for the faint glow of the dashboard. Atlas lay beside him, head up despite the wrapped paw, eyes fixed on the windshield like something might step out of the darkness at any second. Daniel adjusted the rearview mirror. Empty. He checked the side mirror. Empty. Still, his body stayed tight. Awake. All right, he murmured. We don't sit here. Atlas shifted. Agreement. Daniel started the engine. 3:41 a.m. The truck rolled out of the storage lot without headlights for the first 10 yards. Just enough to clear the blind spot. Then he flicked them on, merging into the empty street like nothing had happened. Normal movement. No panic. He drove south first, then west, then looped back north again. Braking pattern, checking for a tail. No one followed. but that didn't mean they weren't waiting somewhere else. 4:12 a.m. He pulled off near an industrial stretch along West Broadway, parking under a broken streetlight that flickered every few seconds. The light was inconsistent, hard to read faces, hard to track movement. Better. Daniel stepped out, scanning the area. Closed businesses, locked gates. A distant hum of a refrigeration unit somewhere behind a warehouse. Atlas jumped down beside him, favoring the wrapped paw slightly, but still steady. "Easy," Daniel said. Atlas ignored him, focused. Daniel leaned against the truck for a second, thinking. Running it through. Someone had followed him. Someone had watched him in the woods. Someone had tried the door. Not random, not curiosity. Targeted. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. Scrolled once, then stopped. Missoula County Sheriff's Office. He stared at the number, then looked down at Atlas. The dog met his gaze. No hesitation. Daniel nodded once. "Yeah," he said quietly. "We keep this clean." He hit call. 4:18 a.m. Missoula County Sheriff's Office, dispatch. Daniel didn't pace, didn't look around while he talked. He stayed still, grounded. "My name's Daniel Brooks," he said. "I need to report a break-in attempt. Location was near Expressway Boulevard. Storage units behind Lot C. Are you safe right now, sir?" "Yeah. Was anything taken?" "No." "Did you see the suspect?" "Just movement. Male. Medium build. Ran on foot." A pause. "You injured?" Daniel glanced at Atlas. "No." Another pause. "Units can be dispatched, but response time may be delayed. You want to file a report now or later?" Daniel thought for half a second. "Later." "All right, sir. Stay safe." The line clicked off. Daniel lowered the phone. He didn't explain everything. Didn't mention the box. Didn't mention the tree. Not yet. Atlas shifted beside him. Daniel crouched down briefly, checking the wrap on the paw. Still tight, still holding. "Good," he murmured. Atlas's tail flicked once. 6:07 a.m. Dawn came slow. The sky lightened over the mountains, pushing back the dark in layers. Cold air settled in the low spaces, mist drifting across the road in thin streaks. Daniel drove again. This time he didn't avoid the forest. He headed straight for it. Atlas lifted his head the moment the road turned familiar. No hesitation. 6:38 a.m. The truck stopped just off Highway 12. Same area, different angle. Daniel killed the engine and sat for a second, listening. Nothing. Atlas was already watching the tree line. Daniel reached down and grabbed the box, held it, then set it back down. "Not bringing it in," he said. Atlas didn't argue. Daniel stepped out, pry bar in hand again, movements slower now, more deliberate, less about discovery, more about control. The forest felt tighter this morning, quieter, not peaceful, watching. Daniel moved carefully, adjusting his path as he went. He didn't walk straight to the clearing. He circled first, wide arc, checking edges, looking for movement. Nothing obvious. But the ground told a different story. More prints. Fresh. 2 sets now. Boots. Heavy. Daniel crouched briefly, studying them. Direction. Depth. Spread. "They came back," he murmured. Atlas stood just behind him, silent, alert. Daniel rose, continued. 6:52 a.m. The clearing opened up. The oak stood where it always had, unmoved, but the space around it felt different, used, disturbed. Daniel didn't step in immediately. He stopped at the edge, scanned. Then, a voice. "Didn't think you'd come back this soon." Daniel didn't flinch. He turned slowly. A man stepped out from behind the same cluster of thin pines. Mid-40s, broad shoulders, work jacket, hands empty, but not relaxed. Confident. Too confident. Atlas moved instantly. Positioning. Between them. Low growl. Daniel's grip on the pry bar tightened slightly. "Who are you?" he asked. The man smiled faintly. "Name's Logan Pierce." Daniel said nothing. Logan took another step forward. Not aggressive, but closing distance. "You found something out here," Logan continued. "Something that doesn't belong to you." Daniel didn't answer. His eyes stayed locked. Reading posture. Weight shift. Hands. Distance. No weapon visible. Didn't mean unarmed. Logan glanced at Atlas. "Good dog," he said. "Smart one, too. Picked it up before you did, didn't he?" Atlas's growl deepened. Daniel shifted slightly, blocking the angle. "Stay back," he said. Logan raised his hands slightly. "Relax, I'm not here to fight." He paused, then nodded toward the tree. "But you're standing on something worth more than you think." Daniel didn't look, didn't break eye contact. "What do you want?" he asked. Logan smiled again. "Simple," he said. "We worked something out." Daniel shook his head once. "No." The answer came fast, clean, no hesitation. Logan's smile faded just a fraction. "Careful," he said. "You don't know what you're dealing with." Daniel stepped forward. Just one step. "Enough." "I know enough," he said quietly. Silence stretched. Atlas didn't move. Logan studied him, measured, then exhaled slowly. "All right," he said. "Your call." He stepped back. One step, then another. But his eyes never left Daniel. "This isn't over," Logan added. Daniel didn't respond. He didn't need to. Logan turned, walked back into the trees. Gone, just like that. The clearing went quiet again, but the quiet had changed. Daniel stood there for a long moment, the pry bar still in his hand, Atlas still guarding his position. Then he looked at the tree, at the split bark, at the place where everything started, and he understood something clearly now. This wasn't about what was buried inside. It was about who was willing to take it, and how far they were willing to go. 7:14 a.m. Daniel didn't stay in the clearing, not after that. He didn't dig, didn't touch the tree, didn't even step closer than 10 feet. He just stood there a moment longer, letting the silence settle back into place, as if the forest itself had watched the exchange and decided to say nothing. Atlas stayed close, closer than before. The dog's body angled slightly toward where Logan had disappeared, like he was still tracking movement long after it was gone. Daniel turned first. "Come on," he said quietly. They left the clearing without looking back. 8:02 a.m. The truck rolled onto Highway 12, tires humming against the pavement. Morning traffic was light. A logging truck passed heading east, heavy and loud, the smell of diesel hanging in the air for a few seconds before fading. Daniel didn't speed, didn't slow, just drove. Atlas lay down this time, head resting between his paws, but his eyes stayed open. Always open. Daniel reached over once, adjusting the wrap on the injured paw without looking. Still holding, still clean. "Hang in there," he muttered. Atlas blinked once. 8:47. Fort Missoula Museum sat quiet under a pale morning sky. The buildings looked like they'd been there forever. Old wood, faded paint, history layered into the walls in ways you couldn't fake. Daniel parked near the edge of the lot, engine idling for a few seconds before shutting off. He didn't move right away. The box sat on the passenger seat. Atlas lifted his head, waiting. Daniel picked up the badge instead, turned it once in his fingers, then opened the door. Inside, the air felt different, cool, still. A woman stood behind a small desk near the entrance, glasses low on her nose, sorting through a stack of papers. She looked up. "Morning," she said. Daniel nodded once. "Morning." He stepped forward, pulling the badge from his pocket and setting it gently on the counter. "I need someone who knows military history," he said. The woman adjusted her glasses, leaning in slightly. Her expression changed. Subtle, but real. "Where did you get this?" she asked. Daniel didn't answer directly. "Found it," he said. She studied him for a second longer, then nodded. "Wait here." 9:03 a.m. A man in his late 60s stepped out from a back room. Gray hair, steady posture, the kind of presence that didn't need to raise its voice to be heard. He picked up the badge without asking, turned it, examined the edges. His brow tightened slightly. "Where exactly did you say you found this?" he asked. Daniel didn't answer the question. "What is it?" he asked instead. The man exhaled slowly. "U.S. Army," he said. "Early 20th century. Around World War I era, maybe a little after." He turned it again. "There's a name scratched here. Barely visible." Daniel nodded once. "I saw that." The man walked over to a table, pulling a magnifier from a drawer. He leaned in, studying the surface carefully. A long moment passed. Then, "James Carter," he said quietly. Daniel didn't move. The name landed, stayed. The man straightened slightly. "Private." Records show a James Carter out of Montana, listed missing in 1919. Unit moved through this region during post-war operations. Never made it back. He looked at Daniel now. "Where did you say you found this?" Daniel hesitated. Just for a second. Then, "In the forest," he said. The man's eyes held his, searching. But he didn't push. Instead, he nodded slowly. "There were stories," he said. "Soldiers moving through these areas. Some carried valuables. Some didn't make it. Things got lost." Daniel reached into his pocket, pulled out one of the coins, set it beside the badge. The man's eyes widened slightly. "Where?" "Same place," Daniel said. Silence stretched. Then the man exhaled. "All right," he said. "Then you need to understand something." He tapped the badge lightly. "This doesn't belong to you. Not really." Daniel didn't argue. He already knew that. The man continued. "But that doesn't mean you're wrong for finding it." Another pause. "It means you have a choice, no?" 9:41 a.m. Outside, the air felt colder. Or maybe Daniel just noticed it more. Atlas sat beside the truck, watching everything that moved in the parking lot. People, cars, shadows. Nothing got past him. Daniel leaned against the hood, the badge still in his hand. He turned it once more. James Carter, a name that had been buried, forgotten, left behind. Atlas stood up slowly, walked over, then sat again right in front of Daniel, close. Daniel lowered the badge slightly. Atlas didn't take his eyes off it. Same reaction, same focus. But this time, there was something else. Stillness. No tension. No warning. Just quiet. Daniel exhaled slowly. "Yeah," he murmured. "I get it." 10:12 a.m. Back in the truck. The box sat unopened. Daniel didn't touch it. Not now. Not yet. He started the engine, then paused, thinking. Logan, the break-in, the footprints, the name. James Carter. Everything connected now. Not perfectly, but enough. Daniel shifted into drive. "All right," he said quietly. "We do this right." Atlas settled into the seat. Not tense. Not relaxed. Ready. 9:30 a.m. Missoula County Sheriff's Office. Daniel parked in the visitor lot this time. Didn't hide. Didn't circle. Didn't check mirrors. Not because the threat was gone, but because this part had to be done straight. He grabbed the box, held it for a second, then stepped out. Atlas followed. Inside, the building smelled like coffee and paperwork. Phones ringing, voices low, controlled. A deputy looked up as Daniel approached. "Can I help you?" Daniel set the box down on the counter. Carefully. "I need to report something," he said. The deputy glanced at the box, then at Daniel. "What kind of something?" Daniel rested his hand lightly on the lid, then looked him in the eye. "Something that doesn't belong to me," he said. "A beat. And something people are already trying to take." The room shifted slightly, not visibly, but the weight of the words settled. The deputy straightened. "All right," he said. "Let's talk." Outside, Atlas sat by the door, watching, waiting. The wrapped paw rested against the concrete, still healing, still strong. And for the first time since the tree, he didn't look back toward the forest. 11:26 a.m. The door of the Missoula County Sheriff's Office closed behind him with a soft, hollow click. Daniel paused on the steps. Not long, just enough to let the sound settle. Atlas sat beside him, the wrapped paw resting on the concrete, no longer bleeding. The bandage had picked up a thin line of dust, but it held, still doing its job. Daniel adjusted his grip on the empty hands. No box now, no weight, different feeling. He exhaled once and stepped down. 12:03 p.m. Clark Fork River moved slow that afternoon. Water low. Light reflecting off the surface in broken patterns, like glass that never fully settled. A fisherman stood about 30 yards downstream, casting without looking up. Routine. Daniel leaned against the hood of his truck. Atlas lay in the shade beneath it, head resting, but eyes open. Always open. Daniel held a paper in his hand. Receipt copy. Evidence intake. Missoula County Sheriff's Office. Case file number 23-7814. He read the number twice. Didn't need to. Just did. The deputy inside had asked questions. Clean ones. Straight lines. Daniel had answered what mattered and left the rest out. Not hiding, just controlling. The badge stayed with them, logged, documented, handled. The coins, too. Not all. Some. Enough to establish the truth. The rest? That part came next. Daniel folded the paper once, slipped it into the glove box, closed it. Done. 2:17 p.m. Fort Missoula again. Same parking lot. Different purpose. The historian met him outside this time. No paperwork in hand. Just a quiet nod as Daniel approached. "You came back," the man said. Daniel reached into his jacket, pulled out the badge, held it for a second, then passed it over. The man took it carefully, like it mattered, because it did. "We'll register it," he said. "Properly. Name, record, location." Daniel nodded. "No display case," he added. The man looked up. "Not yet," Daniel said. "Give him his name first." A pause. Then the man nodded. "Fair." Atlas stepped forward slightly. "Close." The man glanced down. "Good dog," he said quietly. Atlas didn't react, just watched. Daniel turned, didn't linger. Some things didn't need ceremony. 4:38 p.m. The Depot Bar and Restaurant. Late afternoon crowd. Low conversations. Plates clinking. The smell of grilled meat and beer. Daniel sat at a corner table, not tucked away, not hidden, just present. Atlas lay beside him, head resting near his boot. The waitress set down a plate. Burger, fries, water, $12.47 on the receipt. Daniel didn't rush. First real meal in a while. He took a bite. Chewed slowly. Atlas stayed still, waiting. Daniel slid a piece of meat down without looking. Atlas took it gently. No noise. No mess. They ate like that. Quiet. Normal. For the first time since this started. Normal. 6 months later. 7:08 a.m. Frost clung to the edges of the windows. The small workshop sat just off a side road near the edge of Missoula, wood stacked neatly along one wall, tools arranged with a precision that came from habit, not decoration. A sign hung above the door. Brooks Woodcraft. Simple. Daniel stepped inside, setting down a thermos on the workbench. Coffee. Still hot. Atlas followed, slower now. The old injury healed but leaving a faint stiffness in the first few steps. Then gone. He moved to his usual spot near the door. Watched. Daniel picked up a piece of pin. Ran his hand along the grain. Measured it without tools. Then reached for the saw. The sound filled the room, clean, steady, controlled. 8:42 a.m. A truck pulled up outside. Veterans Affairs logo on the door. A man stepped out. Mid-30s. Quiet. Eyes that didn't quite settle in one place. Daniel didn't greet him with words, just nodded. The man stepped inside. Looked around. Hands in pockets. "Never done this before," he said. Daniel handed him a pair of gloves. "You will," he replied. "Short. Enough." Atlas watched the exchange, then settled again. The man picked up a piece of wood, turned it in his hands, uncertain. Daniel didn't explain, didn't lecture. Just started working. The man followed, slow then steadier. 10:11 a.m. metal clink. Soft. Daniel froze, just for a second. The sound echoed differently in his head. Helmand. Night. Contact. His hand tightened on the tool, then Atlas stood. Not alarmed, not aggressive, just present. Close. Daniel exhaled slowly. The tension left his shoulders. Not all of it. Enough. He went back to work. 12:36 p.m. The workshop door stayed open. People came and went. Small jobs, repairs, orders, nothing big, nothing flashy, but steady, always steady. Daniel moved between tasks without rushing, without stopping. Atlas stayed near the entrance, watching, waiting, still doing his job. Evening, light fading. Daniel stepped outside. The air was colder now, season shifting. He leaned against the doorframe, looked out across the road. No forest, no tree, just open land. Quiet. Atlas sat beside him, the scar on the paw barely visible now, but still there, a reminder. Daniel reached down, resting his hand briefly on the dog's neck. "You did good," he said quietly. Atlas didn't move, didn't need to. Some men find gold and lose themselves. Others find something buried and finally remember who they were. Daniel didn't become rich. He became steady. If you were in his place, would you keep the secret or let the world know? Tell me in the comments where you're watching from, and subscribe if you believe loyalty still matters. Some things don't change a man because of what they're worth. They change him because of what they ask from him. It wasn't the gold, not really. It was a name scratched into metal, a dog that refused to look away, and a man who finally chose to stand still instead of running. Out there, in the quiet between trees and memory, Daniel didn't find a fortune. He found a line he wouldn't cross. And sometimes, that's the hardest thing a person can do, because dignity isn't loud. It doesn't show up with applause or headlines. It shows up in small choices, in what you keep, in what you return, in how you treat something that can't speak for itself. Atlas never needed to understand history. He just knew something mattered, and he stayed with it. That's loyalty. Simple, unshaken, real. And maybe that's the part we forget too often. Not every person you pass is broken. Some are just carrying things you can't see. And sometimes, all it takes is one steady moment to remind them they still belong. If this story made you believe that every person deserves to be seen with dignity, comment one below. And if you want more stories like this, subscribe and stay with us for the next one.